Yo, yo, yo! What's happening?
History 202, video presentation for
Current events, history thingy?
Final project. I think you know what we're talking about.
Hopefully.
So this is on the conflict in Marawi, and we were going to start with this video that we have due to time constraints, and because we're on a video presentation, we're just going to skip that for now, but insert 4 minutes of video here.
Bah! Video.
You are now amazed, and your interest is caught.
Thesis slide. You cannot read that on that video at all.
Thesis slide. The conflict of Marawi happened because radical Islam throughout the ages believes in spreading Sharia by the sword.
Yep. That's thesis.
To help understand our thesis and our presentation, we put together a few terms to define so that we can be more clear to our audience here. So we'll read off a few of them each at a time so that you can understand them. To start, we have Islam is a religious political group. Muslim is a person belonging to Islam. Marawi is a city in southern Philippines, and it is majority Muslim.
Jihad is a term that is interpreted in the Quran as establishing heaven on the earth, heaven's kingdom. And taqiyya, if I'm saying it correctly, is the license to lie about Islam when you're in a position of weakness.
And then, so the Quran itself is the holy text that Islam believes in, and they receive all of their writings and laws. The most prominent is Sharia law, which is like the rules that govern what they do, similar to the Ten Commandments, except for there's a ton of them. And then the Caliphate, which is what ISIS is fighting for, is a country that is ruled by Sharia law. It's the ideal for these people.
And especially when you get to the radical of Islam, I also forgot we changed that. The radicals believe in spreading the caliphate, or that government, across the country, across the whole of the world. The moderate... Skip that for now, I won't be in the presentation.
Trial run.
Okay.
So Muhammad, his bibliography, again, you can't really see the white part, but he was born in 500, the year 570, and he married at the age of 25, and he's in between his conquest and his marriage, he started becoming a prophet, and he received many revelations, and he started his conquest in the year 625, and he started out by conquering Mecca. That was his first step. And he eventually took his followers and his army to as far as Jerusalem.
Oh, side note, Mecca is the first city that Muhammad conquered, and we should add that to our definition.
We'll add that to our definition.
So, and is now the city that every Muslim faces when they say their 5 prayers a day.
One important reason we mention Muhammad is not just that he's the founder of this religion, which is a big part of the radicals we'll be talking about through a presentation, but also because both radicals and non-radicals alike, the faith in general, greatly revere Muhammad, and most all people of the faith look to emulate him. So if there's any questions on how to act in your life or what choices to make, they always look back to the Muhammad figure of, well, what did he do? Kind of like a lot of Christians would say, what would Jesus do? A lot of Muslims will say, what would Muhammad do? And so when we talk about radicals, a lot of time they'll draw their inspiration from Muhammad and some of the choices he made in his life, especially when it comes to violence and spreading his religion.
Yeah.
And if we move on to the Quran, which is the holy text of Muslims, as we said, we found very significant contradictions in its text. On the top quote, we have one that preaches killing of non-believers. And if I could just quote a small part of it, and kill them wherever you find them, and turn them out from where they have turned you out. Muhammad did this when he started his conquest. Any person from other religions, they were killed immediately or made into slaves. But in the second example in the Quran, it's 262, the Quran states, those who believe in those who are Jews and Christians and Sabians, whoever believes in Allah in the last day and do righteous good deeds shall have the reward. And it goes on. So there are a lot of contradictions in the Quran that we've found, and it's really up to your interpretation.
And that's where you get the radicals, right? So the radicals believe only these negative, like war and violence interpretations of the Quran, and then most Muslim people believe in the general feeling of the Quran, which is an establishment of peace and of preaching your beliefs.
But again, there was a lot of conflict on this within all sorts of people that study the Quran. Particularly, it's again muddied because when you have a conflict in the Quran, you look back to Muhammad, and there are clear examples of him at times being peaceful and spreading his word through missionary work and the word, but also times when he would take his followers and they would invade a city and convert people that you'd either die or convert. Well, I guess we don't really need this slide. We kind of cover it. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll skip that.
Okay, so we're going to play a game here. We got these pieces of papers, hand them out.
This will take we're guessing about 4 minutes. Could be a little bit less, could be more, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, but we're going to play a game with the whole class.
Yeah, where telling us to be a radical Islam terrorist and kill everyone. Okay, the Crusades.
Now that you guys know what it's like to be murdered by radical Islams, you can now understand the feelings that brought about the Crusades. Take it away, Ben.
Yes, at least in part. So Jerusalem, as we know, is the Holy Land, and for pretty much since Muhammad conquered it to the beginning of the Crusades, Jerusalem was ruled by Muslim people. The Crusades is when we first get Jerusalem taken back over, and was more pilgrims and pilgrimaging by the people until the third or fourth Crusade, when it turned very violent and just became a conquering of Christendom. At least that's what we know it from our standpoint. Most of the Crusades went against Muslims and was trying to take back land that Christians believed was theirs, and Muslims fighting back believing that it was theirs, and so on and so on. And so there's this huge overarching feeling of this holy war, one religion being right and one being wrong. And so for us and for our topic, this is where we believe we see the reflections in our modern world today, where Muslims haven't changed a lot in their beliefs and in their standpoint of having a holy place to call their own, the caliphate, and us being able to decree our own rule. Back then it was Christianity. Now it's just the people have their rights, that we believe in free reign and in this democracy, and that each person should be valued for who they are and what they believe in. And so there's this still a continued holy war of the radical Islams versus the world. Anything else? I think that's pretty good.
You covered it pretty good. We're right about on time,
I think so, yeah.
So
it's 1830.
we will talk about this subject. It's primarily going to be covered by Hollywood, who's not present with us right now. But the gist of this is the path of Islam to Marawi. So like we were talking about earlier, some of Islam spread peacefully. A lot of Islam spread violently. So one of the first places bumping up to the Middle East is India. And at the time, Pakistan being part of India, the Muslims invaded very violently in this area. And once they got past the border, they met basically a lot of Buddhists. Buddhists, as we know, tend to not be very violent. They didn't really have much in the way of a defense. So Islam steamrolled through a huge portion of India and conquered a lot of people. Now, when they first came to this area, they were a little more tolerant. They kind of barely had a hold of the place. It was a very large region of land. So at first, they would say things like, no big deal, you go ahead and be Buddhist, we're going to be Muslim, just maybe don't do this or this, and we're taking over your house of worship. Kind of light. But as time went on, within 100 years, yes, we're taking over your house of worship. As time went on, it got worse and worse, where it's not just taking over a house of worship, it would get more to a point where it was convert or die, and not a lot of choices in between. And as their strength got stronger and stronger, it became to that point. And it came to the point where India, split off from Pakistan because it was such a contentious issue. So into India, it was mostly a spread through missionaries. From India, it spread to, I believe it was Malaysia and Indonesia. And from Malaysia, primarily, you get a lot of traders that would trade with the Philippines and began to spread Islam. And that's essentially how it first got to the region, is through that chain. We kind of covered this. I don't know. What do you think? Anything to add? Well, we didn't really talk about ISIS.
Yeah. Today, radical Islams are called ISIS. ISIS stands for Islamic State and
We should define
Serbia?
our terms as well.
Yeah.
And ISIS in our terms. We'll add this to our terms and be more precise.
The most important part is that it's the Islamic State, which is the caliphate. The other part goes by lots of other names. ISIS, there's ISIL, there's just IS. So, anyways, it's the Islamic State fighting for a caliphate and wanting this peace by having their own country to be ruled by Sharia law.
Is that a breath or okay? So to move on, we were trying to be a little brisk. We have more to say, but we're trying to be brisk here, short on time in the library. So then the colonization of the Philippines. So Islam grew and grew and grew in the South Philippines, because in the South Philippines it was very isolated. A village here and a village there. There was no Philippines at the time. So Islam became the only central authority there was in the South. And it grew and grew and grew, changed the political landscape of the area. At the same time, the Spanish, or like 100, 200 years later, the Spanish came in from the north, and they centralized the northern part. Then when they butt heads, the Spanish conquered Islam in the south. But it had never been done before, so it was a lot of growing pains in the region. But from the very moment that Spain conquered the south, they colonized the north and conquered the south, they have been butting heads. The radical Islams in the southern Philippines have from the very beginning felt that it's not okay to be ruled by someone else. If we go back to that caliphate idea, one of the primary core beliefs of radical Islamists is that it is not okay for anyone to be in charge other than radical Islam. So to have a radical Islam that covers the whole world, well, it's not okay that I have to pay taxes to an entity that is not us. It's not okay that I have to follow their rules, or that I can't enforce my rules in my neighborhood. So it became stricter and stricter. And the conflict grew and grew. So it was always pretty small because they got conquered. You don't have the power to fight back. But over time, there we go, sources. So maybe we'll add a little something to that.
Yeah, so we need definitely a deeper analysis of these things.
Yeah.
So essentially what ISIS is today is they are trying to polarize the world, and they've done that in many ways. The conflict in Marawi is just one example of how they are doing that, and they're definitely trying to spread their power and prestige by the sword. We believe that they have used violence as a means of getting people to be for or against them, but that polarization in either case has worked to their benefit in getting headlines and being seen, even though as a group, ISIS itself is very small. Even on the South Island, like the Muslim population there is less than 10% of the Philippine population. And so
I think
there's
another
lots to say for how they've spread.
Another important fact to include, I suppose we're going to reorder the presentation a little bit, but the Crusades, their influence was felt in the Philippines as well. It's been this holy war on and off, and even at the time when the Spanish first hit the islands, it was at the very, very tail end of what some scholars call the Crusade period. So there's definitely some feelings of our army is righteous and right, and they were just fighting on the other side of the world, an Islamic horde. So they come over here, and same story. Oh, more Muslim people. We've got to conquer them and fight back and fight for our colony and our lands. So in conclusion,
you have to tie everything back in. Didn't really do that.
ISIS in Marawi because they have continued to spread by the sword and by immigration. They were already there, and so they've used the sword to take over and have now been defeated by the sword.
Just as they've done for over 1,000 years, radical Islam has pushed for this.
Boom.
Okay.
Okay, guys, I'll post this.